Nerdish Nerdy Nerd News.
Hi, and welcome to Nerdish Nerdy Nerd News. Come along and ride with us as we explore, discuss, and nerd-splain some of the most interesting topics of today.
Hey, I'm Ferg. I spent my youth playing sports, then I moved into IT, so I've been around nerds quite a bit. I hope to have some laughs and learn some things along the way.
Hey, I'm Tim. Hung around with nerds a lot growing up, hoping that it would rub off. I think it kind of did, because I'm kind of nerdish. And as always, my co-hosts.
Hey, thanks, Tim. I'm Christian. I've been playing and writing, creating games and Dungeons & Dragons since high school. My idea of a relaxing weekend is playing vids with my buds online. I also used to do complex math troubles with my dad for fun. I am very nerdy. And with us, to help us understand the world a little better...
Hi, I'm Jess. I've been programming and using computers since the early 80s. I'm a voracious reader, consistently going through about 500,000 or more words a month. I've got some biochemistry in my background, and I've been using technology for as long as I can remember. I am the Nerd.
You're about to hear one of the most fascinating podcasts available on the internet today. Listen in now as host John Leslie and his dynamic guests are talking about radio.
Thank you very much, John Morgan. John is the host of the podcast Grasshopper Notes, and you can find it wherever you get your podcasts. And there are about, I guess nowadays, there are about 8 or 10 or 15 or 20 different places where you can get your podcast. Now, one of the things that we have thought about now for a couple of months and have decided now to expand the scope of our interviews talking about radio. And so we decided to figure out what radio actually is, because we've talked about adding interviews with hosts of podcasts. And we said, are podcasts actually radio? And before I get into these definitions, I want to introduce our guests so they don't sit there and fall asleep before we get them on the air. And folks, there really is a Moose Jaw, Saskatchewan. It's located in Canada. And our guests today are Jess Halsworth, Christian Schoberg, and Fergal Kearney. Hi, guys.
Hi there.
Are you there? Yeah. And you are the host.
Here.
You're the hosts of a podcast called Nerdish Nerdy Nerd News. What we're going to do today is a rather unusual thing. We've never done this before. I have in reverse. I was a guest on a podcast and I recorded it, and I'm going to play back that interview that was made of me sometime in October. And our guests today are also going to be recording this program and using it as one of their podcasts. So are you guys all set to start your podcast as you normally would?
Yes, we are all set and ready to go.
Okay. Go ahead and start your podcast.
Nerdish Nerdy Nerd News.
Sorry for the technical issue. What's going on this morning? Expect us nerds to have the internet on lockdown, but
right. Well, you never know what happens or what's going to happen when you do these things, not only live but for the first time too. And I looked up before we went on the air. I looked up the definition of nerd, and what I found was it's a slang term for a socially awkward person who excels in science or technology. So far, so good, huh? An example of a nerd is somebody who prefers to be alone, working on his computer or doing his schoolwork, and is not interested in spending his time at a party with people that he doesn't know. Does that fit any of you guys? That certainly fits me. I was like that all my life. All right, folks, what you are not aware of is that we had some technical difficulties. Now, you're not going to be able to hear that part because we'll edit it out. But what we did was we put out a call for all available nerds to report to this location. And
The
they,
nerd signal.
yes, it's a beam of light that goes up to the clouds.
And it looks just like our logo. Just
Yeah.
three faces of IT coming to help you.
Three pasty faces of IT.
Yeah. Well, I'll repeat again that actually the name of my podcast is Talking About Radio. I had to think about that for a second. And we're talking with the three hosts of Nerdish Nerdy Nerd News. And I thought to myself, as we now expand the scope of our broadcast to include podcasts, are you guys aware that there are 47 million podcast episodes out there on the internet waiting to be listened to? So we thought, are podcasts a form of radio? Well, according to the definition, radio is a form of mass media and sound communication by radio waves. And so then we said, well, what is broadcast? And broadcast is to send out or transmit something such as a program by means of radio or television or by streaming over the internet. So there you go. And we said, well, what is the internet? Is that over the air? Is that radio signals? So we looked up the internet. Computers connected to each other and to the internet via wires, cables, and radio waves. So you guys are actually broadcasting on radio as well as the internet.
Well, and I mean, technically, we are connected to Wi-Fi with our devices. So, I mean, we are broadcasting on a radio directly, even within our house. If you're using, something like your cell phone or even Starlink or something like that, heck yeah, you're broadcasting over Wi-Fi, over a wireless connection. So sure, all of it is. It's all a bunch of tubes and
yeah. Well, who thunk up this idea of nerd news?
Well, I had a podcast about 10 or 12 years ago called The Digital Crockpot, where just a couple of friends and I would just talk about things that we thought were neat. And that was about it. It wasn't even, specific. It was like anything that we found in the news or whatever. And we did that for like about, I can't remember how many episodes. It could be like 24 episodes over about a year and a bit. And it just sort of petered out. And Christian and I were talking about this, 3 years ago now.
About 3 years ago, yeah.
And we just sort of went, well, this is, it's fairly easy to do and it's fun, and we can get messages and talk out to a lot of people. So, well, why not do it? Because podcasting is one of the easiest things that you could do to generate your own content, because all you really need is a cell phone or something to record your audio on. That's it.
Now you're talking about technically easy.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
From a content standpoint, it ain't easy.
No, that is the most difficult part is what do you talk about? So,
but I mean, we focus a lot on our nerd stuff. Jess and I were both a part of a charity group here in town called the Moose Jaw Gamers. And we had a lot of content that we could use from that, Dungeons and Dragons, just other like board games, things like that are very nerd centric typically. And we would talk about those things. And Jess and I are the nerd and nerdy. That's when we brought on Tim and Fergal as kind of our color commentary. We're teaching them about the world of nerds. So it kind of balanced us out. And we got in with Golden West Radio here in Moose Jaw, which is different than the Golden West down in the States there. They were formed about the same time, but Golden West Broadcasting and Golden West Broadcasters are the two different companies.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we got in with them and we were actually using their studio after hours. And we thought this was a great idea. Like, we were kind of a pilot project for them to better utilize the radio station, because nowadays, like, it's not like you have a live host 24 hours a day in many of the radio stations. After hours, a lot of it's all playback stuff that they've pre-recorded.
Mm-hmm.
At least up here. I'm not sure if that's all over, but so we were like, well, what are the studios doing after hours? Like, why aren't you renting these out? Why aren't you filling them with people who want to get podcasts out and create more content? And they're like, this is a great idea. Let's do it.
It is a great idea.
Yeah. And Tim was actually working at the radio station. So he was kind of our into the world of radio. And so we worked with them for a year and we got the pilot project going. They had about 20 or 30 podcasts across Western Canada that they were kind of doing these projects with. And some of them were paid for, like some of them were dealerships, like let's say a John Deere dealership. They wanted to talk about the latest features in John Deere. Well, they had a podcast and they paid for it.
Mm-hmm.
And some of them got syndicated, like they'd pull the podcast and put it actually on the radio, as well as, you know, posting it to the internet. So it was kind of a tie-in between the old world and the new world. And it was really, really exciting. And then they kind of shut it down. And so we had to resort to moving back into our mom and dad's basement, basically. But that's where we are now with our home studio. And
well, we're talking to the Moose Jaw Nerds. There's a certain ring to that. Jess Hallsworth, Christian Schoberg, and Fergal Kearney. Fergal, you sound like an Irishman.
I am actually Irish. Yeah.
Yeah.
How do you tell?
How could I tell? I've been to Ireland many times, and I recognize that brogue. Where are you from in Ireland?
I'm from Limerick in the Midwest.
Limerick City, huh?
Limerick City. Yeah.
Have you ever been to Dirty Nellie's Tavern?
Oh, I've been many a time to Dirty Nellie's. A fantastic establishment.
It's a shame.
A fine pint again.
It's a shame they built that so close to the highway.
It is. Yeah. Making it so handy.
Yeah, right. And what is that? Bunratty Castle right next door?
Bunratty Castle right next door. Yeah, beautiful castle with fantastic. I don't know. You've been there, have you?
Several times. Yeah. In fact, I think they have my picture on the wall. Whenever I step off the airplane at Shannonside, I get off the airplane. The stock value of Guinness goes up. Now,
they do a lovely medieval night in Bunratty, where they do the ribs, and it's a great night.
It is indeed, and the singers. And now, let me since you've been there many times, let me see if you remember as you walk up the spiral staircase up to the second floor of Bunratty Castle and other castles in Ireland. The staircase is always clockwise. Do you know why that is?
I think I heard that, but I'm not sure. No, but obviously the nerd Jess knows here. Do you know?
Yes, because most swordsmen were right-handed, or they were right-handed, taught that way, and it was easier to defend when you're backing up the stairs that way.
Fantastic.
Exactly right. And the aggressors they were also right-handed, and they didn't have anywhere to swing their swords other than in their face. Am I a nerd or what?
You are,
yeah,
John.
You are.
Yeah.
We'll give you your honorary badge.
Well, before we had our technical problems, I was saying when everything dropped out, but then the nerds came to our rescue and got us back on the air by very cleverly rebooting the computer. When I was a little kid growing up in the state of West Virginia, my father, my brother, and I were basically the same age. He was 18 months older than me. But when we were like 6 or 7 years old, or maybe even 5, my dad would sit down at his workbench with my brother and I on his knees, and we would take radios apart and then rebuild them. And so by the time I was 8 years old or 9, I could build my own radio. And I think I was one of the pioneers of nerdness.
Yeah, it sounds like your dad was too. Like, not many dads would let their kid take apart something as essentially as valuable as that. Like that'd be like letting our kids right now take apart our 42-inch flat screens. Well, just stick a screwdriver in there, kid. Try and fix it.
I let my grandsons do that. I mean, they have fixed my TV many times. It doesn't work, but they've worked on it.
But
Well,
hey,
you can't learn unless you try.
That's right.
That's the part.
Well, let me ask
have to
you.
be afraid.
Let me ask you guys. Aside from us talking over each other, how do you come up with this edition or the next edition of Nerdish Nerdy Nerd? You couldn't pick an easier title, could you? Nerdish Nerdy Nerd News. When you're sitting around in one of your many planning sessions, I'm sure, before each episode, what do you say? How do you say, well, here's what we're going to talk about this time?
Well, I think a lot of it does stem from the news. So we'll look at, what's happening in the news this week. What has Elon Musk done this week? Or what has Microsoft or Google announced? And we've done ones on the James Webb Telescope when it launched or as it was launching and setting up, because it's in the news, and we've explained basically some of the simpler aspects of those news articles. Tried to get rid of some of the myths about EVs, about solar, how hard it is, how easy it is to get into different nerd things. With the resurgence during the pandemic of Dungeons and Dragons, things like that. Like, we sit down and just see what is happening in the news today. And, we as the nerds typically will know the answers to the questions.
or want to find out.
Or want to find out. That's again, the key to being a nerd is wanting to know the answer. And then we'll, sit and we'll ask Fergal, hey, Fergal, do you know anything about this? And he's like, about what? What's that? Who? And so we're like,
yeah,
perfect. That's our next topic. Yeah.
I'm getting a picture of this now. See, I didn't get the notion that this was an educational forum or a podcast. I was getting the image that the 3 or 4 or however many nerds you gather each time, you sit around and regale each other about how much you know about a certain topic.
Well, and most of
Well, one of the things that's really astounding about this is how smoothly it's running.
Yeah, it is mind-boggling. We were using some other proprietary website yesterday that they had, Zencaster, and like I say, we were on for 2.5 hours with them, and
It was
not a glitch,
flawless.
But for some reason, Zoom is disconnecting us and reconnecting us.
Oh, well, years and years ago, a lot of years ago, like back in 1972 or 71, a group of Boy Scouts from upstate New York went down to Philmont, New Mexico, to the Boy Scout reservation down there, and spent 2 weeks up in the mountains on the Boy Scout reservation. And I was on the radio there, and they named the expedition after me, the John Leslie Expedition to Philmont. And so I thought it was important that I go with them and go up into the mountains of the high plains of New Mexico and broadcast live from there back to my radio show. So I got it all set up, and we had a really sophisticated relay, very nerd-like, from a two-way radio in a pickup truck back down to the ranch, and then hooked to the phone lines and back to New York, where they picked it up and rebroadcast it on my radio program back in New York. So I was really tickled to death that we pulled this thing off, and they said that was the first time that had ever happened. I mean, a live broadcast from there. So I got back to New York, and I'm all swelled up, right? And I walked in and I said, well, guys, how was it? And they said, it sounded like you were on the moon.
It's the technology is there, and everything. Sometimes it works, but sometimes even a nerd can't figure out what's going on.
No, that's not true.
Well,
that can't be true.
Oh, it is. Actually, the 3 of us have worked for a telephone company here in Saskatchewan, and he's working now. Fergal's now working for the city of Moose Jaw, and Jess and I still work for the telephone company called SaskTel. And I don't know how many times we'll have some sort of problem out in the field, and it's you're talking to the tier 2 and the tier 3 and engineers, and they're like, this is funny. This shouldn't be doing this, but it's doing this. And you can recreate the problem 20 times and they're still going, scratching their head going,
This shouldn't happen.
This shouldn't physically be able to happen.
Man, I got a bazillion stories about stuff like that, but I want to tell our audience, your audience already knows that our hosts are Jess Hallsworth, Christian Schoberg, and Fergal Kearney. They're located in Moose Jaw, Saskatchewan, and they are the hosts of Nerdish Nerdy Nerd News. And guys, there are a whole slew of other questions I want to ask you about your podcast. And I think we all know where people can get it. But I want to take a quick break for some commercial messages. Do you guys have time to hang around for a few minutes?
You bet.
Absolutely.
Okay, we'll be right back.
Say g'day to an epic Melbourne adventure.
Welcome on board.
Hop on a Qantas flight to Melbourne where you can uncover amazing experiences. There's timeless stories, little mates waiting to meet you, and places to fall in love with around every bend. From way up here to way down under. Start your Melbourne adventure with Qantas and we'll make sure it's the trip of a lifetime.
So what are you waiting for? Come and say g'day.
Toyota makes electric as easy as all the fun of electric made easy. The first ever PZ4X. Toyota. Let's go places.
Are you sick and tired of hearing the same old tired tunes and seemingly endless commercials on traditional radio? Well, we have the answer for you. Tune in to OutsideFM.com, online radio. We have the largest variety because we play all of the best tunes from the entire rock era. And it's all being presented by veteran radio personalities who know their music. So go to OutsideFM.com and download the app. You can listen to us anywhere. OutsideFM.com.
This is Natasha Hain from the Kofifi FM 97.2 Breakfast Show with Kofifi FM 97.2 on the Pacific island of Kofifi, and you are listening to the world-famous podcast Talking About Radio with John Leslie.
Thank you very much, Natasha. And we have as our guest today on our program a whole slew of nerds all in one location. Guys, I think that I have the coolest advertisers of any podcast that I've ever listened to. We have some great international advertisers, and we're very pleased that they join us in our, I guess I don't know how many given we do a month. We do about 3 or 4 per week when possible.
We are definitely jealous of you, John, and your sponsors. Those are some magnificent sponsors that you have. So, and it helps us all, get our word out there and get our products out there for people to listen to.
Well, where can people find Nerdish Nerdy? I'll get this. I'll memorize this. I won't have to pick up eventually I won't have to pick up the paper and read it. Nerdish Nerdy Nerd News.
Well, the easiest place to find us is actually on our website. We'll keep it simple. You can find all our podcasts on almost all the podcast platforms, but our website is probably the easiest, and it's just wildshot.ca. So that's just wildshot.ca. And there's links to all the podcasts. There's our, Facebook profiles and all our social medias. So yeah, that's usually our simplest way to find us is through that. And you can contact us through that as well. So,
well, the personal profiles must be pretty short if you're just real nerds.
Well, you probably on our intro, you pretty much heard it all.
That was it. Now we know all there is to know about you guys.
Yeah, we're many of us are jack of all trades, masters of none, right? Like we've been nerds our whole life, and kind of like the effervescent. Oh, squirrel! Oh, look over here to the left. Oh, squirrel! Oh, look over to the right. We kind of jump from thing to thing, and
whatever takes our fancy for the moment.
Well, when I was in school, it was kind of like being in prison for me. I was never I was a good enough student. I could have been a great student if I'd kept my face to the grindstone. But I was more interested in things like radio and broadcasting. And, during arithmetic class, I would rather watch the ants walk along the windowsill and see what they were doing. And then in later years, after I don't believe I passed math. I maybe got a D. I don't know. But then in later years, when I finally went out into the workplace, somebody told me, or I guess maybe I learned on my own, that all you have to do is put a dollar sign in front of the numbers and everything comes into focus.
Absolutely. Oh, well, I was going to say, one of the things about nerds is they're not like, we aren't always jack trades. Sometimes you have someone who's very hyper focused on something. And those are some of those really smart people that you find out there. But then you'll have someone who's like we are, where we're pretty much anything goes. You find something that's neat and you go after it. So it's really, really kind of all the way around.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I'm interested. I'm curious when you talked about how you watch the news and you'll see what's the name of this new telescope that went up? You mentioned the
James Webb. Yeah,
the Webb telescope. How do you educate yourself well enough to sound like you know what you're talking about on your podcast? I mean, that's a very complicated thing. You've got to do a lot of research and a lot of work, or does it just come naturally among you guys?
When you find something to be interesting, it's a lot easier to learn about it. And that's the most important part. So, somebody else might look at that and go, well, I don't care about that. So it's going to be, like you said, it's like you'd rather watch ants walk along the windowsill and paint dry because it's not interesting to you. But you find something that's interesting to you and you dig into it, and it's fascinating, and you spend your time on it.
And we'll typically, we'll go to, for that specific example, you go to NASA, you go to their websites, you go to JPL, the Jet Propulsion Labs, and look and see what they've got for articles, what they've got for even like MIT. There'll sometimes be parts of the James Webb that came from a specific lab somewhere, and they've got papers that they've written on the specific part that they put into the James Webb, and you can look up all those things online now, because a lot of that stuff, once it's public, once it's been launched, it's not really private information so much anymore, because they're trying to educate the rest of the world. And we'll grab those and grab little tidbits out of it and be like, oh, well, it actually says on here it's a X amount of gigapixels on the imaging processor. We don't give you the whole 300-page document.
That'd be pretty dry reading.
Well, I'm not going to listen there. I can't listen to a show that shallow.
Well, an Irish accent can sell most things, but I don't know about 300 pages of dry stuff like that.
Yeah, I can hear it now.
You start hitting on some of those gosh numbers. Like, for example, the James Webb, as of 3 or 4 days ago, had made 83 significant observations or proofs of things. Like they proved the Hubble constant. They've seen carbon dioxide on one of Titan's moons, which pretty much says there's life there. Things like that, right? 83 since they've launched.
Say that again about life.
on Europa, on one of, or Titan. I can't remember which one it is. Europa? Yeah.
It was Titan.
Was it Titan? I can't remember.
Yeah,
I have to look it up.
It's Titan, one of the
We
two.
don't have it in front of us.
Yeah, that's the one that has the water underneath the ice, and it they've long thought that there might be life down there, but now with the James Webb, they can point it at it, and they can see that there's carbon dioxide. And from everything that we've seen in space and what we understand about physics and biology and chemistry, carbon dioxide usually comes from some sort of process that produces it, and that's usually some sort of life, some sort of aerobic action, breathing, organic or something like that, right? It's not just a chemical reaction that occurs normally. So now they're saying, yeah, we're pretty sure that there's something there. There's not definitive proof, but now we're at the point where we can say we want to go and find out.
Well, I think we Earthlings, we could put up with if there were microbes. Everybody would accept microbes. But if there was concrete evidence that there were actually living creatures on another planet, I don't know how Earthlings would accept that. I mean, I don't know how they would react to it.
And that's a very interesting thing. And a lot of media and movies and books and radio plays, as we know from the past, have taken up that concept. And well, there was a very famous radio play that was broadcast that caused a lot of problems when it was mistaken. So as a real news cast. So yeah, that's something that humans have always wondered. How would we react?
The War of the Worlds.
Absolutely.
There were a lot of mistakes were made. I mean, you don't do that nowadays. You don't take what sounds like takes fiction. Well, when you watch the news, and maybe it is fiction.
I was going to say, we had a whole episode about fake news with a journalist, and
yeah, isn't it amazing?
I don't know. It's kind of gone off the rails there, and in some instances where the news isn't the news anymore.
Well, I look at those photographs in the news, that are taken by the Webb spacecraft, the cameras, and to me it looks like pus.
It's absolutely amazing what they can do with that. Those are just the pictures that they've sort of shown. Hey, this is what we can do, but there's a lot of underlying data to all those pictures. That's what they manipulate and they analyze. So James Webb is one of our biggest accomplishments in space so far.
That is the thing that I don't know how these engineers and scientists who do that, who analyze that material, I don't know whether they're just so brilliant or whether they've been around it so long that it's easy, for them to demystify it. For example, in my own little way here, people who are listening to this are not aware of we're not doing this on tape anymore, on traditional magnetic recording tape. We're doing it digitally, and our conversation appears on a computer screen as what's called a waveform. And I can look over here at the waveform, and I can read it like a doctor can read an EKG. I know pretty much what is being said at what point and what that word looks like, and I can go after it and take it out or put it in. Or if I say something that's not just right, I can take that out and make myself look better.
So make yourself look better, John, or make yourself sound better?
Well, sound better, but see, it's
you can make us all look better. We'll love you for it.
Well, the science of the theater of the mind. When the path to the brain is through the ear rather than through the eye, the listener develops an image of what they're listening to, and it's always they don't think when they listen to an announcer on the air, they don't have this image of Bozo the Clown unless he's acting that way. They conjure up in their mind an image of a person that they like who can be handsome or tall or short. I can't tell you how many hundreds of thousands of times in 50 years people said, you don't look anything like what you sound like. And I have never had one person, not one, has ever walked up and said, you look exactly like what I thought you were going to look like. And I never ask them if they're disappointed. I'm.
I absolutely understand where you're coming from. My voice is nice and deep, and I used to work on the phones when I first started at the company I was at, and a few times I met some of the other employees there talking to over the phone, and they just like, who are you? And then I'd start talking, and they're like, oh my God, you're not what I thought you'd look like.
Yeah. Folks, we're talking to the nerds, the Nerdish Nerdy Nerd news guys, Jess Hallsworth, that's one word, Christian Schoberg, and Fergal Kearney. And I got to tell you a story. After all, that's what this is about, stories. And since you're telephone guys, you'll appreciate this. When I left broadcasting in the late 90s and then went back to television, and I was there for about 5 years, And for those who have never been on television or worked in television, it is a lot of work. It's rewarding, but to do one story, it takes you like all day long. And so it's hard. And it's not, I was really quite good at it, but I never really, really enjoyed it. And so I left television and I went to work for a company that I had absolutely no knowledge of. I had no background in. It was a company that brought sick people to the United States for surgery. If somebody was in, name a place, any country, and they wanted to come to the United States for surgery, we would arrange it. And I was hired as CEO of this company for about 2 years. And I went to Moscow. We opened up an office in Moscow, right next door, interestingly, to McDonald's, that first McDonald's on Gorky Street. And our office was right next door. And I went in there for the setup, to make sure the phone got in there, because we hired physicians to work for us in those foreign countries. And so I'm in this office, and the phone guy is there. And I speak some Russian, but I had a translator. And I said, well, how long before we get the phone in, or before it's going to be operational? And he said, probably be, no more than 2 weeks. And I said, 2 weeks? How can that be? I said, we're right in the heart of the business district in downtown Moscow, and you can't hook into a bus up there and get us going? He said, we don't do it that way here. We take the wires from this phone instrument and take them all the way back to the phone office. They climb up every pole.
Wow.
With my wires.
That's a hell of a wire run.
Yeah, that bundle was as big around as a sewer pipe.
Holy.
Yeah, and then just about when they got it hooked up, we decided to move to a different place.
Wow.
So,
yeah, that would definitely add to your workload.
Yeah. Well, let me ask you guys about the response that you've gotten. One of the things about podcasting is it's very, very difficult to know how many people are listening, how many people are downloading. I guess you get numbers depending on what podcast platform you're associated with. And we just went over the 3 million download mark on our podcast. But we're also broadcast on 5 radio, internet radio networks. And there's no way to meter the listeners there. We're on the Somali English language, Somali network, the Caribbean network, one out of Detroit and one out of upstate New York. But anyhow, do you guys have any idea of your all the hard work that you're putting into this?
We do have some idea of the stats. Not anywhere near your numbers. we wish they were, but
they will.
Yeah, we have an idea of and that's our hope is, we keep going at it. And I mean, we've got our regular listeners who, sometimes will write into us and, give us ideas. We've got a producer out of Winnipeg who kind of helps us with some of that as well, and he tracks some of that for us. So we we're I mean, a lot of it we're just doing it for us. And that's the key. I mean, the three of us enjoy hanging out with each other.
Yeah, most of the time.
That's important.
It is, yeah.
Yeah,
for sure.
yeah. If you hated each other, that'd be a real thing.
For me, it's about learning, right? When we're doing these shows, we're learning at the same time, right?
Yeah.
So
it's a hangout, it's a learning session, and if people do it and connect with it, that's awesome. Like that's, we're not doing it for the celebrityism, we're not doing it for the money. We're doing it because we enjoy it and we want to, get the info out there and talk to people.
We'd be having these conversations anyways. Might as well record it and let other people listen.
Exactly. Why not? And I got to think that of all of the people who apparently listen to this podcast, there have got to be a whole slew of nerds listening. And particularly, radio people tend to be really pretty nerdish. When you get them cornered, they finally admit to it. So nerds of the world unite.
Well, and you said it yourself, John. I mean, you can look at those waveforms and know what you've said and where what part of the conversation it was just by looking at the waveform. If that's not nerdy, I don't know what is.
I feel cleansed. There's there's a certain catharsis about being, or at least coming out and admitting that one is a nerd. We live in a, you got to understand that during the course of my broadcast years, I traveled the world and I had a very exciting career. And I went to faraway places where people have never been. I've been up on Mount Everest. I've been in Russia, Siberia. I've been all over Europe. And so you would think that I would just embrace everybody and all of the people around me. But we now live in a gated community in Central Florida, and my wife and I and our dog, Howdy Doodle, we walk every morning. Yeah, his mother's Australian Shepherd and his father's a poodle, so he's an Aussie Doodle, and his name is Howdy Doodle. He tends to be on the nerdish side too. But where I'm going with this is, we go for a walk every morning around the whole area here. And I see people coming, and I say to my wife, let's get over here in the shadows until those people go by. I don't want to have to find out what they think about today's weather,
That's an introvert. That's an introvert. We're also that. There are extrovert nerds where they like to go out and talk to people, but they're far few between.
I'm that weird one.
Yeah. Are you?
Yeah, that is. Yes, I am the extroverted nerd, and that's kind of like with our Moose Jaw Gamers, where we had the nerd fundraising. All the other nerds on the board, we were all, okay, who's going to do the radio spot this week, and who's going to go on TV and do the interviews there? And everyone just looks at me and goes, "Yep, you're doing it, Christian.
You got it."
And I'm like, "Yeah, you're right. I do enjoy it." I mean, me as a younger person, I was in touring musical reviews all over Western Canada.
Really?
Theater. I was a theater nerd. And, Jess and Fergal were different types of nerds growing up, but still, in their, Fergal did a lot of rugby and Jess did, football and other things. We're very diverse, the three of us, from our roots of where we came from. But yeah, I'm definitely the extrovert.
Well, I find this really fascinating. I think it's a brilliant idea. People, they want to go to guys like you to get things explained to them. I would listen. If I knew that you were going to talk about something that was of interest to me and explain it to me, I would certainly listen. I'm a sponge for knowledge, and I think it's a great idea, and I hope that a whole bunch of people, not only from my podcast but from whatever social media you use to advertise yours, I hope they flock to it and make it very successful for you.
Well, like Christian said, if someone's listening and they're like, "Oh, I wish they do this topic," just send an email. We'll pick it up.
Yeah, or you yourself, John. You need some researchy, nerdy stuff done, and it's just too dry for you to cut through. Hey, have the nerds on. Have the nerds on for. Okay, let's dumb this nerd topic down so that we can all understand it. That's what the nerds. We're kind of we call ourselves the Nerdherd because that's what we are.
The Nerdherd.
We're here for
helping.
The Nerdherd, helping people out. Yeah.
Well, all these years, people thought they were watching or looking at the Northern Lights, and here it was your nerd signal being sent out by the commissioner.
Third commissioner.
Yeah. Well, guys, I despite all of the little glitches that we had, and they were pre-planned. I want our audience to know that none of this was by accident. When we started this, even before we went on the air, we decided that we were going to have at least 5 technical glitches to demonstrate how the nerds could snap into action and, and get them resolved. And so that, that speaks volumes about your skill and your knowledge.
Well, we'll throw that out there. All else fails, turn it on and off.
There you go. All right, guys. Well, thank you very much. Our guests have been the premier nerds of the internet world out there. Jess Hallsworth, Christian Schoberg, and Fergal Kearney. And I think I may have seen Fergal at Dirty Nelly's when I was there. I think he bought me a beer while I was there. And if he didn't, he should have.
I should have, yeah.
In closing, we're running out of time here. I want to ask you a couple of things. One is about the city of Moose Jaw. That just gives us such a picture of Saskatchewan, Canada. There aren't many places that would name their city Moose Jaw. Was it really named after a moose and a jaw?
There's a river valley that runs through that's supposed to be shaped like a moose's jaw, and the First Nations people called the area in their language Moose's Jaw, so that's where the word the name of the city came from.
Well,
that's one of the stories.
Actually, what I said was not correct, because in upstate New York, near Elmira, New York, there is a city of Horseheads, and Horseheads was named after really the Native Americans, when they moved in there, they found a field or a large area scattered with the skeletons of horses' heads. And so they very cleverly named it Horseheads. Well,
that's common here in Saskatchewan. We have a lot of places that are named for the First Nations name for it. So it's not something that's uncommon here either.
The last time I was up in Quebec, which was a couple of years ago, I was up in Kippawa near Temiskaming, Quebec, and I went in to buy a can of beans or something in a store, and they asked me my tribe number. And I said, I'm sorry? So I was unfamiliar. Do they do that where you are?
Yeah.
They ask for your treaty card if you're at certain places. And actually today is national holiday.
That's what I was going to ask you about. Well, tell us about what today is.
Truth and Reconciliation Day.
It's so the First Nations have been treated pretty horribly in the past, and some atrocities have been found. And what our society's done is we are trying to reconcile those by telling the truth and accepting what's happened and moving forward with it. And this is one of the day that's been picked to focus on that. So
and then also kind of spotlight and let the First Nations celebrate their culture and their people and show off who they are and who they were to us, so that we understand where they came from as a culture and how they fit into our culture as a society, as a Canadian culture. And actually, Fergal's got a shirt on here. It says "Every Child Matters," because that's one of the kind of topics with the residential schools that was very sad for the last few years. And I'm sure it even made it down into the news for you guys as some of the atrocities of the large burial sites that were found at many of the residential schools.
Yes.
Around the nation. So, it's our federal government decided that we should have a holiday, a day to recognize and reconcile and tell the truth.
Very good. One final question to Fergal. I'm curious how you found your way from Limerick City to Moose Jaw. I don't mean by plane.
Well, John, it's the love of a good woman. You know what that draw is. So yeah, my wife is from Moose Jaw, and we met online about 14 years ago. And so I came over here to see what it was like, loved it, and stayed here.
Well, that's great. I love Canada. I love Canadians.
And he is a new Canadian now too. He just was it last year?
Yeah, last year.
Finally, he got his full
Canadian
citizenship.
Yeah.
So we welcomed him into our fold.
Well, thank you very much. We've got the three leading Canadian nerds on with us here on our episode. And I want to thank you very much for being on. When we first started this, I was curious about whether we were going to be able to go 5 or 6 minutes. Or, well, we did before the first blackout.
Yes, we did.
But we got it back on, and it was well rehearsed. And guys, I want to thank you for joining me on Talking About Radio. It's been a lot of fun, and I hope we have an opportunity to get together again.
Absolutely. No, it's been an absolute joy, John. And we'd love to delve into more of your history if we ever get you on our podcast to do talk about you and where you've been and what you've done. Because, I mean, your interviews are all great with all your guests, but not a lot of talking about where you came from and the things you've done. So maybe on another episode, we can get together and we can interview you more.
I hope you invite me.
Thanks again for letting us into your ear holes with this Nerdish Nerdy Nerd News podcast. Check out our website at wildshot.ca.
You can find us on all the socials under Nerdish Nerdy Nerd News. Listen and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. You can also subscribe and support us at patreon.com/nerdish to get more bonus content, show notes, and merch.
If you'd like to send us topics for future episodes or comment about our existing ones, please email us info@wildshot.ca. And remember, stay nerdy.
Nerdish Nerdy Nerd News.